It's really with you all. This is a really important discussion, and I'm really grateful to see so many folks in the room. I just wanted to kick us off by first saying thank you to Councilmember Erickson, who brought this item forward. Thank you to all the people on this panel who are here to speak and share insight tonight. Thank you all again for being here. I just want to say this quickly, but in January 2015, I drove to Las Vegas. Somebody who was campaigning for president was speaking, and I knew what he was saying was going to be full of hate. And I found it necessary for myself to disrupt that speech, to unfurl a banner, to say, "Stop the hate." I was kicked out of that rally, as you can imagine, very quickly. Thank you. That man was Donald Trump. He said, "She doesn't know, to hell with her, steal her jacket on the way out." They did all of that. But it was quite the experience putting my body on the line, as I knew that this person who would eventually become the Republican nominee for president and lead our country then in 2016 and again now in this next chapter, it felt like it required something different of myself. And in that moment, there were many people who were looking around saying, this requires something different of us all. And I think a lot of people did their very best then, as they continue to do, and as we will continue to do as we stand here at this first 100 days of this next very different chapter that we're now facing. But I'm really heartened because the organizations that are here have been here. They were there then. They were there through 2020 as we were figuring out our way through COVID. They were there through the first administration. And they were there actually before the problem was defined as Trump too. So I think the experience that's in this room that we can learn from is exactly the right sort of thing that we need to be with. I know our Vice Mayor, John Heilman's in the room tonight, so I want to recognize him. And I know we have members of our boards and commissions and just so many different ways that you can tap into the city's existing knowledge and resources, but each other's wisdom, which is so much bigger and broader than just the city. We're connected to this region, to this county, to this state that is really at the forefront of pushing back against an administration that seeks to deny our rights, to erase our humanity, and really make uncertain a future that we've all worked really hard for. So I think the conversation, again, is just so important. I'm really grateful for you all to be here. I'm going to pass the mic over to Vice Mayor Heilman now, and then we'll hear back from the rest of the council, but thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our great panelists for being here, and thank you, Councilmember Erickson, for bringing this forward. I just want to share one perspective. We're going through a really awful time, and it's not going to get better anytime soon with the administration in Washington. Part of what I do when I'm not on the City Council, I serve on a board that focuses on international LGBT rights. And many of the people that we're working with and the organizations we work with, they've been living under a regime that has never been supportive, that has always been repressive. So I hope that we keep in mind as we're going through this, there are some people in the world who've never had the opportunities that we've had. And they will probably not have those opportunities for a long period of time, because what Trump has done, he has set back global LGBT rights probably a generation or two. And a lot of the people we work with also deal with HIV. They do HIV work in their countries, and that too has been set back as a result of what's happening in Washington. And again, thank you all for being here. Thank you for fighting back all the time. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Hang, and then we'll hear from the troublemaker himself, John Erickson. All right. Yeah.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Heilman. Good evening, everybody. I'm Councilmember Danny Hang, and I wanted to thank Councilmember Erickson for bringing this item forward. And I wanted to thank our amazing panelists for being here tonight. I'm really proud to be with you all tonight here at our Safeguarding Our Rights, the first 100 days Town Hall and Resource Fair. My parents came to this country as refugees, escaping war and searching for something better, for safety, for dignity, and for the choice to build a future. Like so many others, they saw America as a place where that was possible. And while they didn't have much, they held on to that belief because their lives depended on it. And that's why tonight is so personal to me. The attacks we're seeing right now from this administration on immigrants, on LGBTQ+ folks, on women, and even on children, They aren't just headlines, they're real. And they hit at the heart of the communities that make up this city and this country. Knowing your rights is about survival. It's about standing up, not just for yourself, but for the people around you. It's how we keep the promise of this country alive for generations to come. So thank you for showing up, thank you for speaking out, and thank you for keeping this fight alive for all of us. And it's my pleasure to introduce Councilmember John Erickson.
Right, we're gonna get started because they already gave out my middle name, so I don't need to talk anymore. And I just want to thank my colleagues, including Councilmember Lauren Meister, who isn't here with us, but this city stands firmly united against every cause at the table and those that aren't the table. And let me tell you, I think Pickle, our drag queen laureate, said it best themselves when they said, what would it take for West Hollywood to ever, like, you know, say, oh no, we're gonna ease up and not do that. And she's like, oh, they would probably need tanks at the border of La Brea and Doheny. And even then we'd probably throw the middle finger to the administration. So I'm so glad to serve with each and every one of you every day, and thank you for supporting this unanimously. All right, so we're gonna get into our incredible panel, and we have a wealth of expertise, and please make sure you're out there signing up to the listservs as well. First, right here to my left, we have Tara Russell-Slavin from the Los Angeles LGBTQ Center. We have Phil Curtis from APLA Health. We have Alexandra Magallon from the Trans Latina Coalition, and I also want to acknowledge the iconic Bambi Salcedo, who is here as well with us. We have Christine Parker from the ACLU of Southern California. We have Tom Temprano from Equality California. We have Jamie Knirk from Planned Parenthood Los Angeles. And we have Ariali Hernandez from Churla. So we have one of the best panels of everything you would want to do and get involved in this work right now. So I am going to, once I get past their impressive bios right here, because there's a lot, I'm going to talk through some of the work that we're doing. And so through a lot of the executive orders, funding cuts, and layoffs, the Trump administration has begun, chaotic might not be the right word, what's some other adjectives that we can say? Burning it down, just literally pointing and shooting, cruel, shameful, all of that work. And the actions have been disjointed without clear direction and intentionality. There have been a lot of work with Doge, I call it Dodge all the time. He's an idiot. The federal agencies being gutted, and we've seen what they've planned to do with Title X funding. They're making dramatic cuts to the HIV and AIDS prevention and treatment programs. And when we hear about these actions, it's really difficult to understand the direct impacts on people, including those of our own community. So my first question goes out to the service providers, and that's APLA Health, the LGBT Center, Planned Parenthood, and the Trans Latina Coalition. And maybe I can start with you, Tara. What, if any, have been the direct impacts on your organizations and the people that you serve?
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for having me here this evening. Again, my name's Tara Russell-Slavin. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer at the Los Angeles LGBT Center. So when just at a very base level, we have already had 4 federal government contracts canceled. Almost 3 out of the 4 were research-based. 1 was specifically around studying HIV and race. 1 was around studying HIV and trans communities. 1 was around STIs. And all of those were just literal, receive a notice, one day your work must stop, effective as of this notice. It is a very intense process, it's very abrupt, it's very disruptive. It is undoing decades of public health research. And we've also seen similar language in other contracts, and we know, we receive a significant amount of federal funding, and I would have no problem saying that most of it is at risk right now. But I think more just, on the very, very ground level, is this has such a direct impact on the communities we serve. Like the fear, the concern, the worry, the lack of, that people will be denied access to care, will have their care literally cut off the next day. that stress, right? Like those added barriers are just, they're huge. And I don't think it's overstating to say people are literally terrified right now. And so I don't want to overtalk because there's so many people on this who will have very similar experiences, but just across the board, I think our immigrant communities, our trans communities, our youth and our seniors, like everyone is just feeling it so deeply right now.
Phil?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Phil Curtis. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at APLA Health. I think many of you probably knew us as AIDS Project Los Angeles. We were an AIDS service organization before we became a federally qualified health center in 2014. We now serve about 14,000 patients, still provide a broad range of HIV and AIDS services. So and we just opened a new clinic in West Hollywood on Santa Monica and Sierra Bonita. So if you're looking for health care, come see us. We've got great docs. I can only say ditto to what Tara has said. The direct impact that we've had, we lost 3 grants that were looking at stigma, sleep loss, and some other factors affecting older men living with HIV. And just as Tara said, we got the notice in the middle of the afternoon, and it said at 5 o'clock your work's done. So we had to lay off 4 researchers who were working on that grant. Otherwise, we provide primary, oral, behavioral health, HIV and STD testing. We have a trans wellness program in Long Beach. And for right now, for us, it's business as usual. And we're not going to stop until somebody tells us we have to. Now, are we afraid that somebody's going to tell us we have to? Well, yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, the big fears for us are Ryan White funding for people living with HIV, federal HIV prevention funding, which it's hard to know whether it's been cut yet or not. The president said in his skinny budget that he was going to eliminate it, but we're not really sure because Congress has to take this up first. But there's the first clue. And then Medicaid or Medi-Cal in California. So, I don't know how many of you know or rely on Medi-Cal, but it's the largest Medi-Cal program in the country. It covers about 1/3 of the state of California. 70% of our patients rely on Medi-Cal for their health care. Medi-Cal was extended after the Affordable Care Act to single individuals with no children. And what that meant, that was a turning point, because what that meant was that for the first time, single people living with HIV could get their health care through other than the Ryan White program. Then this year in 2024, we expanded Medicaid. It's 2025, I'm sorry. In 2024.
We all wish it was still 2024 in a different way.
It was 2025, right? The expansion on undocumented individuals. It was this year. Yeah, so Medicaid was expanded to undocumented individuals who met the income requirements. So this is a fabulous healthcare program, one of the best in the nation, and you can get high quality healthcare through Medi-Cal. And the Republicans want to cut $880 billion from Medicaid nationally over the next 10 years. If they make those kinds of cuts, if they reduce the federal money that comes into California for Medi-Cal, the state could be looking at a $15, $20, $25 billion hole in a budget that is already underwater. So this is what we're looking at. So when I saw the question about what's been the direct impact, the loss of the researchers was a direct impact, but we're really just waiting for the next shoe to fall.
Alexandra?
Alexandra Magallanes, Associate Director of Programs and Services from the Trans-Latino Coalition. Since the inception of the Trans-Latino Coalition, our founders were very focused on the holistic approach of serving the transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex communities. And our founders were very sure to not focus specifically on HIV testing. Although HIV affects the transgender community, specifically trans women of color, Latina and Black, the most, of all the populations, and that is due to discrimination in the workplace and having to engage in survival sex work and then acquiring HIV. Nonetheless, the Trans Latino Coalition focused on ensuring that we navigate the transgender community's care or service provision with a holistic approach. What that means is that our focus has been workforce development, re-entry programs, many things that are not very tied or specific to why we become HIV positive as a community. And so fortunately, it hasn't impacted our other grants as much, but we have been impacted, obviously, when it comes to HIV testing, as my other colleagues here share. I think the most important thing when thinking of these cuts that are affecting our health care, and this was very real when COVID hit, and our community that is disproportionately impacted by HIV or other impacting illnesses. When COVID hit, it hit us hard and it killed a lot of our community as AIDS did. But then also our community was also impacted by monkeypox. And this is when I have to sit back and think at the macro level when I'm serving our community, or when we're serving our community in the micro level in LA County, which is a huge county for TGI folks, what that impact does on a macro level for our communities. And so we strategically are focusing on county or city, county, and statewide initiatives that provide care for incarcerated folks or undocumented folk or TGI communities seeking care. And so that is why you see our advocacy is so fierce across the state and the nation, because we are a national organization. But it is so fierce because it affects our livelihood at the root. And because we're impacted by discrimination, even just accessing health care, that we have to go access health care in certain organizations, like the ones mentioned here, we are not openly received with open arms at just any healthcare facility. Sometimes, well, including myself, have been turned away because of our bodies or because of our diagnoses. So it is really important to think, how does healthcare connect us all? And when we think of healthcare, we don't often think that something so simple as like the flu or as COVID can impact an entire community, an entire nation, an entire globe, as COVID-19 did. So what Trump is doing is very detrimental to society and to care overall, because he's choosing to go after the very basic need, which is healthcare, and healthcare affects us all.
I also just want to highlight, I believe and correct me if I'm wrong, the Trans Latino Coalition is the largest trans-led organization in the entire country. World soon, that's right, but country, and that's tantamount to the work that...
Nation, yes.
Nation, we're gonna shoot for the world, because I always bet on Bambi Salcedo and the team behind her. So, last but certainly not least, my former employer, but a person that I've seen rise in these ranks, Jamie Knirk. What do you got to say about a really light topic like abortion?
Oh, you know me, I love to talk about it. I appreciate you in the early remarks mentioning Title X, right? So for folks in the audience that aren't familiar, Title X is the largest family planning funding that comes from the federal government. It provides funding for things like STI testing, pregnancy tests, right? Really important care that everyone needs. And so similar to some of the organizations on this panel, there was a notice that went out on March 31st saying April 1st, Title X funding is gone. That was not a surprising thing. This did happen to Planned Parenthood health centers in the original Trump administration, so it was something that we were watching for and prepared for. Nonetheless, still really goes to show how much this administration is willing to throw incredibly amazing programs under the bus, communities under the bus, people in need under the bus for the sake of advancing their own political agenda, right? Another thing that has impacted Planned Parenthood a lot outside of a budgetary aspect from this administration is some of their legal enforcements and where they've stood on Supreme Court cases and enforcement of different federal laws. So an example is something called the FACE Act, which is the federal law that makes it so you can't storm a Planned Parenthood, right? You can't block people from accessing a health center. Unfortunately, the administration announced that they are really not going to be enforcing the FACE Act anymore, with the exception of extreme cases. What that definition is to be determined. And in addition to that, he also pardoned a number of anti-abortion extremists that have a record of attacking Planned Parenthood health centers. So he's really taking a stance that is emboldening a lot of anti-abortion activists to feel even more empowered to show up outside of our health centers, to intimidate providers and patients. At our Pomona Health Center back, I wanna say in like November, there was 990 protesters, almost 1,000 protesters, and I imagine most of y'all have not been to the PPLA Pomona Health Center. It is not a very large building. So you can only imagine what the intimidation of trying to go and get your birth control medication and having to fight through a crowd of 1,000 people, right? Also, in addition to that, in kind of this post-Roe world, as all of these state bans have gone into effect, as policy around abortion access has, really become varied and really detrimental in a lot of places in this country, the previous administration was willing to challenge certain state laws that were making it so you couldn't access abortion care even if your health was at risk, right? So there was a court case around this law known as EMTALA, which essentially says that if you are having an emergency, the hospital has to provide you stabilizing care. And so the previous administration, sent a notice to a couple of states that were not intervening when someone's health was at risk, right? Because kind of what's that line of when your life is at risk, right? Emphasizing that it is part of EMTALA that you have to provide stabilizing care, which includes abortion if that is the appropriate care for this instance. The Trump administration pulled out of that lawsuit. So that is no longer something that has to be enforced in the state of Idaho right now. There is some ongoing litigation, but it's a lot more specific. One of the hospital systems that was impacted did, do their own lawsuit, so they're still able to provide stabilizing abortion care, but the federal government has pretty much said, we're not intervening in those cases anymore, right? So in addition to, the fears that there is around Title X, around Medicaid is a massive funding source, about like 70 or 80% of Planned Parenthood patients are Medicaid patients, there is a lot of direct policy initiatives that is impacting our patients as well.
And for everyone, I obviously worked at Planned Parenthood for 8 years, but I remember this Pomona case, and if you can imagine any type of a health center, just imagine a box, like a square box, and 900 people circling the health center because there's a public access alleyway, and so that's controlled by the city. So does the city come out? Maybe. And imagine them blocking access for people actually trying to get in and out of a parking garage. A gate that took us 3 years to get done as well. That was my pride and joy. But I also want to highlight that everybody and every community group that we've all mentioned up here is a part of the entire community as well. So Planned Parenthood does HIV and AIDS testing and PrEP. That's where I went for 8 years before I went to Men's Health Foundation. Shout out to Men's Health Foundation, right? The Trans Latino Coalition, we work in partnership, APLA, the LGBT Center, LGBTQ people of all sizes, shapes, colors, beauties in the world, we all try to service and we all support each other. And that kind of wants me to lead into, so when we're talking about these issues, imagine and make sure we're centering the intersectionality of everything. I'm going to jump over to some of our favorite topics right now, and that's litigation and lawsuits. But before we get to really and by the way, Jamie could have gone through 18 different lawsuits that are at the courts or not at the courts, and she didn't. So she, we love Supreme Court case law. But I want to actually start with immigrant rights and immigrant justice and go over to Aurelie from Churla. Can you talk about right now what's on the minds of your community members, especially highlighting the work, first and foremost, that you did to make sure immigrants during the fires that we all faced got services, cash assistance and everything, so you went above and beyond, but people not even being able to going to the Red Cross centers because ICE was standing outside, and just some of the things that we might not think about, but could you kind of talk about what's top of mind for everyone?
Thank you, everybody, for hosting us and for being here. And we're talking about a lot of heavy stuff, but I just need you to take a deep breath through your nose and exhale through your mouth, because we're still living, and we just got to remember that every day. Like, the day that we live is the day that we get to fight back. That's just like it, That's what we got to remember. So Churla was founded in 1986. In 2026 will be our 40-year anniversary. And it was founded out of the 1986 legalization bill. That is the last time that people in the US who are immigrants were able to adjust their status. For 40 years, people have not been able to adjust their status. And we continue to see the consequences of that. So in California, we are seeing California respond to a generation and multiple generations of people who have worked, who have given their life, their dreams, and their bodies to this nation, and this nation refuses to give them justice. That is the reality. And so when California, when cities like West Hollywood stands up for immigrant justice, they're really like speaking up for decades of injustice. And I just want to name that, because that's the reality that we're living in. And thank you for bringing up the fires, because that was a perfect example. Today we are here remembering that it's 100 days of this administration, but the cruelty that they began started even before the 100 days. And there was a mandate in federal just practice that if there was a natural disaster, there was no immigration enforcement. So when in California, we were seeing those devastating fires, Customs and Border Patrol was in the Central Valley arresting people and pulling them over. That is the depth of cruelty that this administration is showing to people. And I want to say people because too often this administration uses the term immigrant, and they use a worse term that we refuse to use because we are human. And so they will say immigrant to test their policies, but all the policies that they are testing on immigrants are policies that authoritarian governments test to take control. And you need to know that and be aware of that. It starts with immigrants, but immigrants will not be the first, and they will not be the last. We have seen the cases of American citizens being taken, being arrested, and being detained endlessly without due process. That is what we're living through right now. That's the harsh reality of this moment. We're now living in that constitutional crisis that we kept asking, when do we know there's a constitutional crisis? So in January, before the Trump administration took office, enforcement had already begun. And we started hearing all of the reports of the fires in the Palisades and in the Dinas, Altadena, Pasadena. And at the same time, we were hearing reports of the fire moving, and we were hearing reports of immigration enforcing. And it was horrible, to the point that on one of the afternoons, we were working with folks in the San Fernando Valley who were trying to support the Dinas, and right in the middle of our call, we got somebody saying, there's immigration at like the Costco in Pacoima. And everybody's heart dropped, and they had to go check. And it was Customs and Border Patrol there, and it was FEMA, because FEMA's under the Department of Homeland Security, and they were just getting pizza for firefighters, which is great. But they did not have to go in uniform. They did not have to go in the car that was marked DHS. They didn't. That is a different level of cruelty. That is what we continue to see, that they will just show up to intimidate and to scare. And what we have been telling people over and over again is, know your rights is across the board for everyone. It's not just if you're an immigrant. Nobody should have the right to come into your door and come into your house without a warrant. That is a basic right of this country. It's not just for immigrants. Nobody should have the right to, on the street, demand that you identify yourself, demand that you identify if you're a citizen without just cause. And they should not have the cause to search you, because that is not what the Constitution says. And absolutely, you have the right to remain silent and not be intimidated into surrendering yourself in any way. Those are just basic rights that all of us have. And we've been doing a lot of work to say these are immigrant rights, but we're seeing that these are like people's rights in this country, no matter what your status is. That's just across the board. And that's what we have to hold to. So we join our partners in a lot of litigation, a lot of things that we've been fighting back in, some things we're winning in, some things we need to go and take a second stab at it. So one of the things is out there at our table is information about the immigrant registration, which is an executive order from President Trump saying that people who are non-citizens have to register. I just want to take you back in history, that is the beginning of a lot of horror in many countries in the past, people having to register. And we absolutely sued and said, absolutely not. And the court in our first hearing was not on our side, but we are going back to fight until we know that we have to stand in the side of justice and that is not right for the Constitution of this country. It's not right. We also have joined many of our partners here in litigation to make sure that the funding that law by Congress provided to us is returned to us, that he does not have the power to just say no. And the other one is that there was a lot of the Trump administration stopping humanitarian parole, the right of people to come into the country and seek humanitarian parole. And we're suing so that we can restore that, because that is absolutely something that is international law and that should be honored. Every day we wake up and we look for this immigration tracker. There's this online tool that tells you how many immigrations on actions there are. Today there are 261. So in 100 days, there have been 261 immigration actions, federal, at all levels, just all kinds of changes that will take years to litigate, to work in the system, to figure out, and the consequences are our people are scared. That is the consequence. Across the board, when we talk to service providers, everywhere. When we talk to folks in the streets, we have employers who are using this time to intimidate workers. We have healthcare centers who are having mothers not show up to their appointments. We are having kids afraid to go to school. And thankfully, we have a system in LA where we have leaders who have stood up and said, not in my school, not in my workplace, not in my city hall. We, thank so much community for that, because that is community demanding that of leadership and leadership listening, but that is not what's happening everywhere else. So I say with that, thank you to this city and this city council, because your leadership is so strong, and it's to be commendable when we are seeing that this example is needed so many other places.
Well, thank you, and keep holding us accountable, because we don't do everything right. No one does everything right 100%, but that's how we get better together. I also want to highlight the May Day March that is happening.
Yes, this Thursday.
This Thursday. So if you're downtown in DTLA, we got a lot of great speakers, but May Day is always a place to show up for another action.
9 a.m., Olympic and Figueroa. It's the Workers' March. It is turning 25 years. 25 years ago, immigrants and labor turned out in LA to fight back wage theft. And that's why we show up every May Day. And this year, we are in solidarity with all our labor partners, because we know that federal jobs lost are labor jobs lost. And anyone who can just have their job ripped away in violation of their contract, in violation of their rights, it has to stand up and protest. So we're gonna be there, 9 a.m., Olympic and Figueroa.
There you go. I also want to highlight the press conference tomorrow that's happening right upstairs at the steps, put on by a number of partners up here, about the illegal arrest of Andrew Jose Hernandez Romero, who is a 31-year-old gay asylum seeker from Venezuela. So that's happening tomorrow at 10 a.m. upstairs. 12 p.m. upstairs. So if you're around, please come by. I know there'll be some press coverage for that as well. Okay, let's talk litigation and policy, because we are shady queens at the end of the day, and we love a good phrase. But let's start suing some people, right? ACLU of Southern California, where I had the pleasure to be a board member for 10 years and president of the board for 4. I just love you all so much. And thank you, Christine, for being here. You're one of the best. Tell us, who are we suing? How can we donate? And when can we show up to court to start throwing tomatoes at people?
I would say hold your tomatoes for now. We don't want any assault charges.
Yes.
But at the
That was a perfect setup for a lawyer's answer, by the way. So there you go.
But I will say, at the federal level, we're really fighting the Trump administration at every turn. As of last week, we've filed, ACLU has filed 46 lawsuits and 58 other legal actions in response to the actions of the second Trump administration. And that ranges from immigration to LGBTQ rights to repro, criminal justice, racial justice, voting rights, immigrants' rights, First Amendment rights, and beyond. So for example, in the LGBTQ rights space, we have filed a number of lawsuits. I'll name a couple of them here. One is Kingdom v. Trump, which is suing the Trump administration for his executive order prohibiting gender-affirming care for people who are in federal prisons. Another one is Tyrrell and Turmel v. Edelblut, and that's that's suing the Trump administration for his executive order banning trans athletes from women's sports nationwide. And really, in these lawsuits, it's only the early stages, but we're seeing some successes actually, and that's something I think to hold on a little bit of hope to. Another lawsuit is PFLAG v. Trump, suing Trump for his executive order that's attempting to restrict access to gender-affirming care for trans folks under the age of 19 across the country. In February and March, we secured a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction, which are fancy words for a block of the executive order, providing at least a little bit of relief to folks who are just trying to get the health care that we need. As we've been talking about, health care is something that really unites all of us and is a fundamental right. So ensuring that trans young people and their families and their medical providers who have been thrown into the chaos of this administration can have a little bit of relief as the lawsuit proceeds. Last lawsuit I'll mention is Orr v. Trump. Here again, we've seen some hopeful successes early on in the case. This is against the Trump administration's executive order that was refusing to issue passports with accurate sex designations for trans, non-binary, and intersex folks. And it was just the other week, I think it was actually about 2 weeks ago, we secured a preliminary injunction there too, blocking the law from going into effect for our named plaintiffs. So the State Department now has to issue our plaintiffs updated passports, and we will be filing a motion asking the court to certify a class and extend this relief to everybody who would be harmed and impacted by these unconstitutional passport policy. That's really just a sampling of what's going on at the federal level.
A lot to do and a lot to write, so thank you. Tom, Equality California has been on the forefront of not only changing homophobic, transphobic, bigoted policies that are still actually on the books, but also fighting back at the statewide and federal levels. While we are pushing good policy up there, could you give us some snapshots of some of the bad policies that you've been fighting up in Sacramento right now and in any other state you want to highlight, so that way people can know that this stuff actually still happens in California and we have to fight back?
Absolutely, and a great question. Actually, Tara and I were just discussing how after really, decades of strong forward progress, I will say in this horrible administration, there is no place I would rather be as a queer person than in California, because for 2 decades, we have put in place the strongest legal protections and resources for not just our community, but the most marginalized members of our community of any state in the nation. And the Trump administration has, of course, taken aim at those. Right now, I think we have the Department of Education is investigating our policies. The Department of Agriculture is investigating our policies. So we have these sort of Trump-level threats of the good policies that we've put in place to protect folks. But to your point, we are, in Sacramento, on the defensive in many ways, in ways that we haven't been in, I would say, almost a generation. We had it's these 100 days. I'm like, I don't know if it was months, weeks, days. It could have been yesterday, 2 years ago.
It was all but a dream, Toto. It was all but a dream,
Can we wake up yet?
Yeah.
But we actually had 2 bills heard in the Assembly Arts and Culture Committee that were attempting to strip away. We've had legal protections in place in California for over a decade with no incident to protect trans kids and athletes who just want to play sports alongside their teammates, be able to access appropriate facilities. And we had 2 bills in the same hearing attempting to strip away those rights. That we, frankly, I mean, one thing I will say, when we're looking at silver linings here, for those of us that do this work and have sort of seen our opponents, these anti-LGBTQ folks, really growing their strength and flexing, I think for a lot of us it felt like, how can we get people to pay attention? How do we get people to understand that this is a problem in California too? People get it now. We had hundreds of young people, and even more impressively, the parents of trans and queer kids show up to Sacramento. We out-organized these folks. We killed these 2 anti-trans bills in committee. That, again, I don't know if that was weeks, days, months ago, but it was recently-ish. But even today, today we were able to successfully stop a bill by Senator Shannon Grove that would have repealed protections that we have in place to ensure that incarcerated transgender folks actually are able to be safe and have facilities that match their gender, but also just like the basic modicum of decency and safety that everyone deserves. And we're seeing these landmark pieces of legislation be targeted, not just by Republicans in some instances in the state legislature. So at the same time that we and everyone up here are fighting these horrible federal things, we're trying to pass legal protections in California to help folks expedite, name and gender changes on state ID. We're trying to protect lawyers who protect folks. We're trying to protect healthcare. We're trying to do all of this proactive stuff to stop a horrible federal government. And then at the same time in Sacramento, we're having to stop these legislators from trying to repeal and roll back the really strong protections we've already put in place. So it's exhausting.
and if you've never been to Sacramento, especially at this hearing, was that a Chris Ward bill that...
It was Chris Ward's committee.
Yeah.
And he did a fantastic
job.
You
could have seen, I happened to be up there actually that time, and the lines out the doors, if you've ever been to Sacramento, it was wild. You could tell what side people were on because of the t-shirts, because they always dress horribly. But it's like, leave my kids alone. It's like, really? We're not coming for your kids. Leave us alone. But, I will say it's scary. And especially as an elected official, from my colleagues, both in the room and watching, when people come and bombard you with that type of anger, it's always hard to look them in the face, no matter what your convictions are, and say, get lost, right? Because you don't know, because these people have turned violent. We've seen it outside immigrant rights. We've seen it with our trans community. We've seen it with the LGBT community, and we've seen it with Planned Parenthood, right? And so I will tell you, you're doing the Lord's work. So policy is a full contact sport when it comes down to it.
The gloves are off. The gloves are off,
oh, yeah.
Council member.
Trust me, we're pretty resourceful. I'm going to ask you one more question, Tom, that isn't on here, but I know you can take it.
Sure.
And then I'm going to come back to our healthcare providers, because I want to talk about what you're preparing for in the future. Everyone's talking same-sex marriage, and Christine, please, if you want to highlight this as well. There is no such thing as precedent anymore at the Supreme Court. Every court case that they are saying there's some little hint in there that we're going to come, Idaho or someplace is trying to, do what they want to do. Where are we at with this? The Supreme Court might get a case and it might be kicked back for lack of standing. We saw that with the EMTALA case and a couple of other ones, but they give them always come back and do this, and then they might hear it. Where are we at with some of those threats? Because I hear about that every day.
Yeah, and I would defer to our legal part. I always, the caveat, I am not a lawyer. Nothing should be misconstrued as legal advice. Currently, as you mentioned, there isn't a case pending. But to your point, this court several years ago rolled back 4 decades worth of precedent around abortion access. And when we have marriage equality, which we're, not even a decade into legal protection for. And if you look at some of what those justices themselves have said about marriage equality, it is not even a stretch to feel like this could be before this court in the next year or two, which was why with all the folks up here, we passed Prop 3 last November to take the sort of zombie language of Prop 8 out and to affirmatively establish a right to marriage equality for both same-sex and interracial couples in California in advance of that, so that if there were a Supreme Court ruling that struck down Obergefell, we would at least have state-level protections. But I'm not a lawyer, but I certainly, like, if there is a body that I am not confident in, it would be this Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So that is why we took that affirmative step, and would not be surprised to see them take that up in the next couple sessions.
Yeah, and I just want to say, as much as this trans issue has become polarized, right? Just 2+ years ago, the city of West Hollywood passed the nation's first multi-stall gender-neutral bathroom ordinance here. So all stalls being multi-stalls being gender-neutral, right? We passed it, it was great, but the realization that there was a plumbing code fix in the building code. Equality California, Senator Ben Allen ran that up at the state. We had tons of partners, tons of coalitions. The bill passed unanimously in the House and in the Assembly and the Senate. And just 2 years after that, we're seeing people fighting over anything related to gender neutral, right? That's how quick these things can change. I want to go back to Alexandra, and I want to talk about how are you all preparing for what's next? I saw like 8 alerts today when I was in Whittier and doing all these things. I was like, I can't look at this. And, and I am a cisgendered white gay man who's an elected in West Hollywood, and I stand on that privilege, and I have to defend and make sure that I hold my own privilege and accountability in that space. But that can't be said to people without technology, without housing, without jobs. How is your community preparing for the unknown? And then I'm going to come to the rest of my team over here.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Is the mic on? No?
Maybe.
Do you mind? Check.
Here, use this one. We'll figure it out.
Thank you so much for asking that question. Before I answer that, my 15-year-old self is just thanking the both of y'all and everyone in this room for the work that you do. As I'm an intersex person, that means, for those of you that don't know what intersex is, the old term was hermaphrodite. So I grew up with an ambiguous look in high school. And I was that kid in that rural high school, the one of the 500 high schoolers that was different. I was that one kid that wanted to play sports but couldn't play sports because I was too feminine and too masculine. I was that one kid in the entire area that stood out. And so I want to say thank you so much, because so many years I lived in suicide ideation, because in the gym locker rooms, I was getting pushed into the locker rooms and beat almost every single day. And to this day, I have a phobia of stepping into a fitness center. Like, I will not step into a fitness center to this day, to the fear of getting beat or pushed into a locker room. But that's not just my story. That's the majority of transgender, gender nonconforming, and intersex kids' story.
Yeah.
Like, let that sink in. And that's a child, right? Regardless if I am trans, if I am gender nonconforming, or if I'm intersex, or whatever, I'm a human child. And to get beat like that almost every single day to the point that you just don't want to live, I just want to say thank you so much. And my heart was just like so happy to hear that. What the Trans Latino Coalition is doing to prepare for this, and we have been preparing for this time. We've been preparing all this time because our name has been constant in the news. And whenever we go out and rally, whenever we go out and advocate, whenever we go out and protest, please know and understand that the reason why we are doing that is because we are being discriminated. The reason why we are doing that is because we are being attacked, hurt, we're not being listened to. We bring it up to law enforcement, we bring it up to elected officials, and something is just not happening, or it's impacted one of our lives or many of our members' lives. And so that is why we are out there protesting. That is why we were out there advocating. And so when we say we might be the first, right? We might be the one that Trump is going after right now. But when we told the whole community, he's coming after all y'all next, is because we knew at the core that if he came after one of us, which is the weakest link, that is just to get an understanding of how you would react to the weakest person being attacked, and then it would be you. So we were fully aware and understood that although we were up first, and trust me, we've been up first since high school, in the gym lockers, in the playing sports, we were always up first. So we knew, and we know what that means. We know that we must diversify funding, that we must diversify tactics, that we must diversify and go in many different routes. The majority of our community has come to us and has asked us, do I go stealth? What does stealth mean? Is when you go non-presenting as trans, when you do everything in your power, surgeries, hair, everything, to where you cannot notice that I am trans. Many of our community have increasingly gone for surgeries, not because, oh, I want to look like your next top model and I want to be the girl on the magazine. No. The reason why many of us have transitioned is to stay safe behind our surgeries so that you don't kill us. Yeah. Please listen to that. Many of us fully transition so that you do not kill us. So that I don't have to go back into that gym locker room and face that bully and get pushed into that locker room again. And worse, so that I don't kill myself first before you get to me. So when we talk about why is trans issues such an important topic, understand that it is not my identity. It is not me. It is not what I represent that he is going after. It is the weakest link of American society, what he is going after. And he is going after that because he will know if you do not stand up as a nation for your weakest link, you will not stand for anyone. So what we continue to do is we continue to educate our community. We continue to show them many different ways on how to engage work and allow them different ways than just sex work. Although that has been our survival way of life, we know that we want better for ourselves. We know that we deserve better for ourselves. And At the end of the day, I am a human being. I deserve love. I deserve everything that everyone here deserves. So that is how we continue to prepare, educate our community so that they can thrive for themselves.
That's right. Tara and Phil, I know I want to come over to you from the healthcare space. You have healthcare, you have mental health, you have so many different issues that your organizations take on. What are you preparing for in the unpreparable? The county doesn't have any money, sorry. You know, the state doesn't have any money, sorry. You know, the federal government ain't giving us any money, right? West Hollywood has money, so we'll talk about that last. But my city manager doesn't like when I say that. However, it's true. Where are you all at with backfilling dollars and everything like that so you can prepare for the influx of stuff that's to come? Whoever wants to go first.
No, I don't want to go first, but I will. I think that when it comes to healthcare, I mean, I'm sitting here and all of this sinks in, everything that's happening in every community that we care about. And I wish on the healthcare front that I had some good news, but I think my news on the healthcare front is that the worst is yet to come for us. It'll be built into these reconciliation budget bills that Congress is putting together. And the cuts to healthcare could be really, really severe. Millions of people could lose their health coverage. So there's really nothing we can do about this right now except advocate, and we do that. And of course, California and Los Angeles County especially has an extremely friendly legislative delegation in Sacramento, in Washington. And so on a national level, I think the decisions have been made, don't pester our friends, go after the guys in the red states who are also going to lose big, because if anything can stop this from turning into a demolition derby, it'll be folks in the red states saying, "Ooh, wait a minute, you can't do that." But we'll see. We just don't know. So what are we doing? We're not hiring new positions. We're freezing positions. We're talking to staff about what's going on. We talk to patients, but we don't want to scare patients and clients, but they know. Like all of us, they know what's going on. We have red and green cards in our clinics for if ICE shows up, so that staff and patients know what their rights are, know what they have to do. We have a chain of command to take charge if ICE comes in. But really, we're waiting for the next shoe to fall, and it's not going to be pretty.
And that's the truth.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to, one thing is, back on February 22nd, the Los Angeles LGBT Center did file one of these lawsuits, right? We're a plaintiff with 7 other co-plaintiffs, and specifically challenging the gender ideology, which is just awful, right? It's the one that essentially says, if you acknowledge, right, quote unquote, promote the existence of woke gender ideology, then you are not eligible for federal funds. And so we are suing that, to challenge that, as well as 2 of the DEI executive orders, because we're also seeing, right, like, we know our communities are intersectional. All of those orders, what is happening is they are now starting to move into the contracts. So they're going from the federal government to the state, and then the state to the COCs through HUD. They're going to, we anticipate that they're gonna come out next in survivor services. And for people who don't know my background, I started at the center as the lead domestic violence attorney. We just saw last week more than 350 anti-violence organizations defunded $880 million through the Office of Justice Programs, Office of Victims of Crime. And what we're seeing is some of those are getting restored. Who is not getting restored? Programs that specifically focus on trans folks, LGBTQ folks, culturally specific communities. And yet, right, this is an administration, and I'm always reminding myself this, right? This is an administration that is filled of abusers, right? Like, they have all been practically convicted. And so
some
should we
multiple
have any
times.
surprise, right, that like here they are defunding our survivor services safety net across the country? I mean, it almost seems like ridiculous to say you really don't support people who are facing this violence, and no, they don't, right, because they're cruel. And I think the point you were so excellently raising, right, like they are attacking the vulnerable, and they are testing the waters and seeing how far they can push. We are also already running phone banks in other states. So we are we've been targeting Idaho. We've been hearing that the real focus is to, look at the House as opposed, I think, to last time around looking at the Senate. And really talking to constituents in those states. I think to this, healthcare tends to unite people, and how can we really focus in on a handful of key swing districts and get them, if we lose that $880 billion for Medicaid, it is gonna be game over for health services. I mean, it is just gonna be devastating across the board. And all that to say is we could keep that, and they could still come after, they're still gonna continue to target, right, LGBTQ folks, immigration folks, right, people who are doing the good work, the work for the most people who are most in need. And so we have to figure out how to diversify, how to keep fighting back, and keep looking to our allies.
Yeah, and they're defunding things like cancer and leukemia research. They're not just stopping at HIV and AIDS. I know my friend Steven in the back has been a long-term advocate on those healthcare issues. Like, they're coming after everything. Before I go to you, Jamie, because I know you, I'm gonna go over to Tom and Christine. Tom, what policies are you pushing what would you like to highlight in terms of progressive policies that you're pushing? And Christine, how is the ACLU of Southern California and National preparing for the next 6 to 12 months? Tom, would you mind starting?
Sure. A few of the bills that are in our bill package, which if you go to eqca.org/legislation, you can see our entire package of bills. But a few that I did want to highlight are AB 82 by Assemblymember Chris Ward, who is the chair of the Legislative LGBTQ Caucus. I cannot say how important representation is at this moment. California has the queerest state legislature in the nation. And when you look at our bills, and even bills that are not on our package, we have a few allies in there, but it is our community stepping up to protect our community in elected office, which is why the electoral work that we do to build queer power and elect queer people is so important, especially in moments like this, because we have folks like Assemblymember Ward, who authored AB 82, which is a Health Data Privacy and Safety Act to make sure that we are closing any possible loopholes for confidential patient data to be shared in a way that might allow patients to be victimized. We have SB 59 by Senator Scott Wiener, again, an LGBTQ caucus member. That's the Transgender Privacy Act. That is allowing folks to seal court records for name and gender changes, which are currently a part of public record. But again, we are concerned, not just with this administration, but in this political climate, that folks may use that public data to dox and target members of our community. I want to shout out one of our LA delegation members, Assemblymember Mark Gonzalez, AB 554, which is expanding and preserving access to PrEP, which again, we have, there are current cases pending before the Supreme Court that could limit the requirement for coverage of PrEP. We know they're coming for that. So making sure that California is standing up and expanding access and then making sure that folks continue to cover all types of PrEP. And the bill package is long. I could go on. Please check it out, eqca.org/legislation. I will also say, what we also need is folks to actually call their legislators, call in and be active and engaged on both fighting the bad stuff and good stuff. So if you are interested in helping to make sure that we preserve our best in the nation existing protections and stop their erosion and keep moving the ball forward, come find me after, because we need you.
Some of the best lobby days. I think every group up here does some form of lobby day up at the Capitol, and I've been to several of them, and let me tell you, they haul you all over the Capitol, and you really hit those doors. And in Planned Parenthood world, we had pink boxing gloves that you got, and they sometimes were for fighting when we needed them. But Christine, what are we doing?
Yeah, I really just want to echo what Tom was saying. We're really trying to strengthen California state laws and create this barrier to prevent federal intrusion into our rights, into our lives, into our communities. There are so many frightening things that are happening at the federal level. So we're working on bolstering these state level protections. And one example recently is a piece of legislation that passed, I believe it was last year, called the SAFETY Act. Many organizations up here helped make sure that that law passed and was signed and went into effect earlier this year. And it was really a response to this terrible growing trend that we were seeing in school districts across the state of forced outing, where if a teacher or a principal or school staff finds out that a student is trans, non-binary, or intersex, they must report that to the parents, regardless of whether the student is ready to have that conversation, regardless of whether it is safe to have that conversation with the parent. So the SAFETY Act is reiterative of existing state non-discrimination laws, but it makes it crystal clear that forced outing is illegal. It is unconstitutional. You cannot do it. So that's a really good example, I think, of what we're doing in California. We have great anti-discrimination protections in the law, but what we're doing right now is making it crystal clear and saying the quiet part out loud to ensure that there are no loopholes that the federal government can get in through, trying to make us as safety protected as possible.
I'm gonna finish with Arielle and Jamie, and then I'm gonna ask you all one-worded question, so it's gonna be rapid fire, and then we're gonna open up to Q&A. And I know Andy in the back has a mic or whatever. So, Arielle, what is Churla doing? I know you're taking to the streets, you're doing all the organizing, but what are the next tomorrow? What does next week look like? I know it's changing every day, especially for the immigrant community as well.
Yeah, so our mission at Churla is to create a just society that is fully inclusive of immigrants. And so we know that progressive values are the values that our community holds dear, and so we align fully with the progressive values of all our colleagues and sibling organizations up here. And so that is one, that we know that we have to stand solidly with all the progressive movements that are demanding justice right now and fighting back. And that is one of the first things we're doing. The C in our name means coalition. So we're continuing to recall a lot of coalitions, bring them back forth, and convene a lot of folks so that they can talk and just work together on a lot of the laws, litigation, organizing, and projects that they're thinking through. So we do policy work at local, state, and federal level. So here in LA, we are just continuing to remind our local elected officials of everything that we need to stay in this city and in this county, and that goes back to everything everyone said here, which is funds. Funding is our tax dollars at work, and we just need to remind elected officials of that. When they are making the decisions about how money is spent, we just need to remind them that they need to spend it on community, and that community is where it's needed. So that's a lot of it. In the state, echo what everyone says, we are building state infrastructure to make sure that California stays strong and protected. We are in West Hollywood, which feels very safe to say a lot of things.
Well,
but
not on Sunday. We had that psycho Matt Gates or someone.
I saw that.
I mean, it was nuts. These people are nuts. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk to them.
But it's like LA and the Bay, and then there's a lot of places in California that are not safe for a lot of the values that we represent up here. So we are working really hard to make sure that the counties and the cities that are agreeing with the federal administration remember that California has laws that mandate that they follow the laws that we have already passed. And then federally, we are working with our congressional delegation, with our senators, to make sure that they fight back as much as they can in every way that they can. And there's a lot of case management management. If you're following all the cases of folks who have been, taken without due process, just making sure that we are working in collaboration with all of those folks to get them justice. And then we are a service provider. California has one of the biggest legal service provisions for immigrants in the entire nation. I don't know if you all know that. And it is these tax dollars of immigrants that are working back into the system. So one of the things that we're doing is making sure that people know their rights no matter where they are. There's people who naturalized as American citizens who are now being questioned about their citizenship. So we're representing them. People who are green card holders and need to go to their citizenship interview. Our staff is now going to interview, something that was very basic, that was not at all dangerous, now is. So that's one of the things we're doing. We are a member-led organization. We proudly say that we stand alongside the members that are firstly and deeply impacted and living their situation, and we stand alongside with them, and they inform our policy, they inform our next steps, and we also invite allies. So you can take a step of becoming a Chairla member and also be part of this. And of course, we do a lot of people organizing and civic engagement because we know that that is power.
That is. Jamie, what is Planned Parenthood doing?
So many things. I'm not busy at all.
You're not busy at all, and
yeah,
I
no.
used to be Jamie's boss, for the full record. There you go.
It was so great hearing just all of the things that everyone had to say. I feel like I have been in email chains with all of you at various different points for all of these different issues. As John, you mentioned earlier, right, what is, a really meet the moment thing for Planned Parenthood right now is all of these issues outside of just reproductive care impact our patients, our providers, our staff in such an intersectional and important way. One of the things, my amazing colleague Genesis did have to leave, but you might have met her outside. Every morning we check all of the executive orders and make an analysis about how that might impact operations, how it might impact patients, how it might impact staff, right? And it's from a completely intersectional lens. We're writing about how immigration might intersect into that, how all of these different things that impact gender affirming care might impact us. In addition to that, I think one of the things, in addition to taking that day by day, right? Because it really is that when is the shoe gonna drop moment. I've been at Planned Parenthood for almost 4 years now, so I was in the pre-Roe era. It is kind of what leading up to that decision felt like in that time. It was we knew something bad was probably really gonna happen. We didn't know exactly what that thing was or what day it was gonna come out, but every morning, me and John were waking up at 6, 7 in the morning, refreshing SCOTUS blog.
I'm still traumatized from this. The Supreme Court is a very traumatizing body, and I was once at the gym literally doing skull crushers and listening to a Supreme Court oral hearing and traumatized by everything they had to say. And
exactly.
I still twitch when I think about it.
Yeah, sorry to bring you back there. But it reminds me of that moment, right? And the fallout after of okay, which laws are being upheld? Which ones are blocked? Does Arizona have access right now? Oh, it does. Oh, now it doesn't, right? That's really where it feels like a lot of this is happening, and that's people's lives, right? So it's a lot of approaching this day by day. It's also a lot of community outreach. I think right now a lot of folks need to hear that our doors are open, right? You can still access care, and that we're Planned Parenthood is doing everything in its power to keep the doors open to make sure that you have access to the care that you need. Another thing that we started doing that I'm really excited about and really was successful this past weekend, we're doing community canvassing, letting folks know that there are Planned Parenthood health centers in their community. Shouting out Genesis again, she led a canvassing group that hit 500 doors in Huntington Park. And so we're looking to expand that to a number of other communities where there are health centers, especially with communities that have extra need or maybe less familiar with accessing those resources and really bringing it to them, and just making sure that people feel, aware and comfortable seeking those services. So really taking it day by day, both at a macro and a micro level.
Wonderful, thank you. So my last question is gonna be one of hope, because we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff. So I thought of this event when it was December, and I was sitting in my bed watching something because, I was trying not to watch whatever, and I was just hyper annoyed by everything. And if my staff will attribute to this, it was probably 1 a.m. when I send most of my emails for the council, as many of you know, and I don't sleep. And I connected, I think, a bunch of people. I was like, we got to figure this out. What can we do? How can we get it? You were on leave, I think, at that point. Yeah. So I remember these things, but we got to get together because the first 100 days, it's going to be chaos. And we don't know what we don't know, but let's plan to get together within 100 days. And so I just got to say that my version of hope is all of you sitting up here. Truly, every day, I'm thankful that we get to work in coalition together, and that if we can help one person, 5 people, 100 people, that's our job, right? And our drag laureate Pickles said it just right. They will have to drag tanks through this city before I acquiesce 1 iota to that fascist Nazi administration. Period. End of story. And more cities need to take that stance, right? And we already know how many dollars we have in the federal government and seismic retrofittings on the block in the city of West Hollywood, but we'll find a way to pay for that. So there you go, right? I know, Victor, I get it. But what is one thing you are finding hope in? Because that is truly what keeps us going. Like you said, Arielle, we're still alive, and that brings us one day to fight more. But would you mind starting us, Tara? And if you can't, it's okay, because I get that the doom and gloom of us sometimes are, right? But what is one thing?
Okay, so for some of you know, I lost my house in Altadena in the fires. And you know what? We are having our roses are blooming in from Altadena, and we've taken them to our temporary place, and they're just gorgeous. And that is giving me hope, because there's like regrowth after the destruction.
Oh, beautiful. Phil?
Well, I sort of, I was listening to John Heilman saying that, you know, we've been set back a decade or two, and I don't think so. I don't think my community, your community, I don't think we're going back. So I don't think the end of this story has been written yet.
Wonderful. Alexandra?
I think the thing that gives me hope is our loved ones. As TGI folk, we oftentimes have our chosen family, which we call, because we're rejected so often from our biological families so often. And just seeing the growth, the personal growth, the professional growth in ourselves, from going from homeless to housed to employed, and to have our successes, that just continues to bring me a smile, because I know at the end of the day that just as my life was touched by these organizations, we're touching other people's lives, and we're giving them that. Well, we're not giving them, because they had it themselves, but they're just finding that light that they needed.
Jamie?
Yeah, I'd say community. As some folks know, I play in a queer sports league. It's like the one thing that keeps me sane.
And also sometimes injured.
Hey, but I come back, I bounce back. And there's something just so amazing about having a space where all of us can be so authentically ourselves and like be gay and escape a lot of the world. And it's also really impactful for me because a lot of folks in that space are not particularly political. Like, you know, they're engaged, they keep aware, but they don't keep up to date with things all the time. And just the excitement and like interest that a lot of them have brought in the last couple of months, especially, to come to me and be like, how can I do something? What's going on? Send me your stuff. To like have folks that are outside the bubble be really invested in doing something to change brings me a lot of hope.
Arielle?
People who care bring me hope. Like everybody here who does the work every day shows up even when it's tough. When we know that, you know, there's pain in our staff, in our community, but we keep going. And people like you all who showed up, you know, like to show up to a community event, not knowing what is gonna happen, but just interested. Like people care, that gives me hope.
Christine?
I recently was co-presenting a few Know Your Rights trainings for on LGBTQ student rights and had the chance to present them to a number of LGBTQ students. And so kind of spinning off of the idea of community, I really found so much hope in seeing these queer kids learning about and excited to know what their rights are and to see myself reflected in them and think back to when I was that queer kid in high school and, you know, didn't get those Know Your Rights presentations, but now they are, and they're energized, and they are creative, and they are ready to go. And that, I think, is what really gives me hope is the next generation that's coming up.
Tom.
You know, I mentioned this earlier and also in the thread of community. What's giving me hope are the parents of these trans and queer kids who are not just fighting for the rights of their kids, they're fighting for their right, they're just fighting for their joy, fighting for their ability to exist and live against an oppressive government. And I, you know, right after the election, I've sort of been on a tour of PFLAGs around the state. And everyone I have gone to, they have all said, this is the biggest crowd we've ever had. People are afraid, but they're more than that, they're angry. They're ready to organize, they're ready to fight, they're showing up. You mentioned our lobby day. We had our biggest lobby day in history. It was so big, we had to actually tell folks like we can't accommodate more people. And so
You wouldn't let me come. I mean, you said no.
You could have texted me.
No, I would.
You could
No,
have texted
no.
me.
They are serious.
But no,
people.
and I mean, and these are not just parents coming from LA, from San Francisco. These are parents coming from Placer County. These are parents coming from Orange County. These are parents coming from the Central Valley. And they are coming from a place of love, but they're pissed and they're scared and they're ready to fight. And I think if any, like I wouldn't want to be on the wrong side of those parents, I'll tell you that. So I'm getting a lot of hope out of the love, support, and organizing energy that we're seeing from parents of trans kids in particular in this moment.
Amazing. So we have time for a couple of questions. So someone has a microphone up here. So I see Stephen and Karen. So I want to also acknowledge Mandy from LA County Supervisor, Lindsay Horvath's office, a queer ally, icon, legend, former mayor and council member in West Hollywood. But if you want to come right up to the mic and ask your questions, we'll try. And then everyone's available, obviously, afterwards. But come on up, and Stephen, you're first.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't say I'm celebrating 9 years this week being diagnosed with an incurable form of leukemia that was only discovered because I sought treatment for a PrEP program. And in 2017, we all fought really hard. And I remember how hard every one of these organizations that are here tonight put out efforts to bring people in. And my question is, how are we working harder to create more opportunities for storytellers to come forward? Because as much as I'm involved in this community, and God knows I've been a thorn in so many people's sides, I am not seeing the material inviting us in, and how can we change that? Is it a money issue? Is it a speaking issue? Is it a volunteer issue? What is it? How can we help, and how can we get more involved to help fight back what we did in 2017 and what we're gonna do again this year?
Who would like to? Jamie, I saw you raise the finger.
I can start. So I would love to connect you with our Storyteller Speakers Bureau. So as part of the Planned Parenthood volunteer network that we have, we collect stories from all different types of care. It doesn't have to be that you received care at Planned Parenthood in particular, but I think that story of how you were going for one type of care to get this diagnosis that then changed your life and was so important, that is such a powerful story to illustrate why these services are so important. There's a whole bunch of different ways that we plug in those stories, and I'll touch base with you after about what all of that looks like, but we do have an existing speakers program that I would love to plug you into.
Great, thank you. And it's great, trust me. Karen, who's also the president of Hollywood Now in California Now. There we go.
Thank you. So my question is something I haven't seen covered in the media among all the atrocities happening is the trans community and air travel. I know that the TSA has not been consistent in its treatment of transgender people who need to fly. And I'm wondering if you're hearing, Alexandra, any stories of things going on and what's happening and what can be done because this is a federal thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, we hear this on a regular basis. That's the population we serve. The most thing that we have encouraged our community to do is to get their real IDs, get all of their documents. I actually do not leave my house without my passport card, which is not your passport, but it's the card for your passport. And I just went and got my real ID. So I travel with my passport card, my real ID, my driver's license, and other forms of identification. I'm also Latinx, so that fear is heightened for the Latino community. And we hear that every airport in every state is actually handling things very differently. So now, if you're traveling with your name and gender marker change paperwork, but your IDs don't match, they'll hold you. And they'll clarify what documents it is that you are needing. So we have advised, but we did advise everyone before Trump went into office to get their ID documents in order. We addressed that as soon as we knew that Trump was going to go into office. We brought that up to our communities. We also did that in the previous administration when Trump was elected. So many of us were like on high alert as soon as that happened. We continue to just tell the public to continue to go through that. We hear different things from different counties. So we've also heard that they're taking people's passports. So if you're renewing your passport and you've already done a gender marker change, we're hearing that you're getting your passport taken away. So luckily for me, when I went, I still have some time, but I would not dare go get a new one. Also, many of our community members that are citizens or that have the availability to have dual citizenship have sought dual citizenship in other nations because of this fear. And so I would say if you're able to, and it's not like trying to put fear into folks, but if they're taking your passport away and you are a citizen of the United States and they're taking your documents away, like for what reason and why would you do that? And so it's really scary. And at least with dual citizenship, at least what I've been learning from Mexico, which is where I'm able to get that dual citizenship, is that I'm welcome there. Like, damn.
Yes, sir.
My name's David Comfort. I founded a group, Equality Network, after the passage of Prop 8 to fight Prop 8 to get Prop 8 overturned. That was back in 2008. In 2024, in November, I founded a group, Democracy Action Network, to resist Trump. So I'd just like to say and ask a question. So we must remember where our communities came from. Our communities came from struggle over decades. Indeed, America itself has come from struggle, and that is where we need to return to and where we need to go to. As they said in the 60s, democracy is in the streets. What do you view the role of the organized resistance to Trump, the grassroots organized resistance to Trump?
Well, I know they all have 501c. But Arielle, I saw you raised your hand, so I'll talk to you afterwards about the other parts I want to say, but not televised. So there we go.
I think an important thing to remember is that people have the right to free speech, and that is something that is under threat. And that we have to go back to the basics of what the Constitution says we have rights to. You know, we have the right to not incriminate ourselves, the right to remain silent. We have the right to not be searched without just cause. You know, we have to go back to our basic rights, and our right to demonstrate democracy in a march, in a rally, that is free speech. And we have to remember that, and we have to keep reminding folks of that, and just keep going, keep flexing that muscle, because that is part of democracy. Voting is one part, showing up to city events like this is one part, but also participating in action in the streets is another part. And we often forget that. That is one of the things that is under threat right now, right? There's even been rulings from the Supreme Court about that, right? And so we have to remember that that is a right under the Constitution, and let's just go back to the basics. What are our rights under the Constitution? Free speech, rallies, marches. That is a right that we have.
Yep, take to the streets. And our newest public safety commissioner, Kelly, right over here with our last question. I wasn't able to be here last night because I was sick, but congratulations again, Kelly.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you all for sharing your stories and sharing what you're doing and how it's affecting you. I think all of us here have a really big obligation to go out into our communities and make sure we share the information that we gathered tonight, because it needs to be a phone tree. My question is pretty practical, to be honest. You know, I am an ally of a lot of these communities, and I try to do everything that I can, but right now it's about weaponizing data, right? The big four have our emails, they have our whole social scrapbook of our lives, and at any moment in time, they could shut it off. So I have a question. It's more of a personal question, and if somebody wants to speak up for what they're doing to protect themselves with all of the data that they've put out there for the last 20 years.
Christine, can I maybe throw that to you and some of the issues around data privacy that I know you've kind of done?
Yeah, this is something that we're working on at the legislative level. At various intersections. So one example is, I think it was also last year, the California ACLU's co-sponsored a bill to put an end to something called dragnet surveillance demands. And California law already prohibits tech companies from sharing sensitive data related to where you're accessing like reproductive health care or gender affirming care, but that can be circumvented if police, for example, are searching for anybody who was within a 5-10 mile radius of the grocery store next to the Planned Parenthood. And so that was one example of a bill that we're pushing at the state level, an example of those types of bills to try to create that firewall, that protection, so that that data is not able to be shared and then misused and used against you. So we're continuing there. I know there's a slate of legislation this year as well, trying to continue to protect those folks' data, folks' privacy, so that it's not as easy to come after us, because they are coming after us.
I just want to thank all of these panelists. Could we give them a round of applause? Thank you so much. Get involved, sign up, give them $25, $100, $1,000. All the money goes directly to People Power. And on behalf of the city of West Hollywood and just me personally, a queer kid from Ripon, Wisconsin, birthplace of the Republican Party. They're all Democrats now. Thank you for making sure I had a place to come fight for. So thank you. And I hope you all, thank you, have a great night, and we'll stick around, and there's stuff, sign up, get all the things, and we'll see you all later. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.